I promised to do an augment guide for the new patch, and the reason why I need to do this is because picking augments right now is probably one of the most important skills, because some of them are so bonkers busted that you just need to know what they are and how to play them. So we could go like Master Plus, Diamond, Emerald, Platinum. Let's go maybe Emerald right now. I'm not actually sure what the average rank of the viewer base is, but it's generally pretty consistent with Master Plus, Diamond, and Emerald. If you looked at the meta snapshot on Friday, you'll notice that like a lot of the hero augments are completely busted bonkers. High Horsepower Lilia, probably the best one. Molten Caramel, very strong. Deja Vu, extremely strong as well. And then, of course, we have Witchy Wallop, Zap Attack, and there are a couple of other ones too. But these augments are really easy to play, and oftentimes you could just get 4th place with them, collect 10 LP, and then go to the next game. If you get one of the really good ones, you could fight for a 1st, fight for a 2nd, or a 3rd. But essentially, if you have any amount of items for them, just take the augment and you're going to be good to go. Build Difference, another really good one. But there are also a lot of other augments based on trait augments. It's not just the hero augments. Portal Rise, for example, an extremely powerful comp. Frostfire comp, also very strong. And these comps get like so much better once you get a spatula item or an emblem. And we're going to go over all the must picks and the ones to avoid for this patch. So to kind of learn a bit more about augments, there are different types of them. There are the hero augments that we talked about. There are things called combat augments. That's stuff like Support Golem. It makes your team get more power in combat. Combat augments can also be considered stuff like item augments. Items also make your team stronger, but I consider them a little bit of like a separate category, but they are related. There's also the trait augments, such as getting an emblem. There's like Frosty Frontline, which is specific to a trait, but you don't get like an extra slot for that unit. And then of course there are econ augments, which could be separated out into either like gold, experience, or rerolls. So right now we're in a fast 8 meta. Essentially, if you don't get one of the hero augments that are completely busted, you generally want to go for one of the level 8 comps. That could be something like Horizontal Callista, Frost Pyro Olaf, Portal Rise, Multi-Striker Callista, Pyro Varus. There's like a Flex Gwen Fiora Karma build also out there. A couple other builds too. But what you need to do when you go for a fast 8 comp is get like an econ augment. So generally when you are at the beginning of the game in stage 2-1, we could sort by the placements there. You want to get some sort of econ augment, because those are going to be really nice to get you to level 8 pretty safely, and then hopefully you hit whatever team comp you're trying to hit or something that closely resembles it. The other way to get to level 8 is to win streak in the early game. So alternatively, you could take like a combat augment and be Mr. 100 all the way through. Mr. 100 just means you won every round so far, so like you're at 100 life. If you could keep that up through like stage 3-5, you're gonna have a ton of gold as well and get to level 8 very easily too. But every game we can't be that lucky, so sometimes you need an econ aug to get there. Another thing you can try is doing like a reroll comp. So there are some reroll augments that are great for the Zoe Ari reroll right now, things like Prismatic Ticket. Again, you could generally take those in the beginning of the game. Later on, let's say you have your team generally assembled, you want to pick up things that actually make your team stronger. So something like let me look around a bit. Little Buddies, it's very, very powerful to play this later on in the game if you can make use of the buff. Another example is like Spell Blades. Every time you cast, you deal like a bit of damage based on your ability power. Giant and Mighty, this one makes your team larger and you gain a bunch of flat health and percent health. These are really good to take later on because you just need to be kind of stronger in your team. So let's go over all these augments. There are 261 of them. We're not going to go over every single one, but we're going to kind of generalize a little bit. But let's start with stage 2-1. So again, we talked about 2-1 where we want to go for generally an econ augment or something that kind of dictates what we're going to do that game. So High Horsepower is one of those hero augments. We could skip that, just Force Lilia in that case. Flexible, very strong right now because it gives you 4 different emblems, and they did nerf it a bit, but it was also really powerful last patch, and it's still one of the best augments because people are more used to the set. They're able to be a bit more flexible with it. Molten Caramel, hero augment, same thing. Again, I would only go for hero augments if you have both items for them and like hopefully some of the champions like Deja Vu Galio. I would not go without a Rage Blade. Frosty Frontline, Frost is very good right now. All these trait augments, they're generally very forcible if they're in the meta right now, and Frost right now is. Last patch, if we go back a bit, 4.15, we could look up Frosty Frontline. It wasn't like the best thing in the meta. It was decent, but you average like 4.47 if you take it at stage 2-1, whereas something like School Mascot, which was very strong, you got like a 3.72. So obviously like these trait augments are going to be very dependent on what's strong in the meta, And you could ask yourself like, how do I know what's good in the meta? Well, you could go to bunnymuffins.lol/meta and figure out which comps are good there. But you already know about that site, I'm guessing. Next one up we have is Sugarcraft, another trait augment. Trait augments, flexible, and all these hero augments are really good because you can kind of turn your brain off, because whatever emblem you get from flexible, you're just going to hard force that comp. Whatever trait augment you take, you just hard force that trait. And whatever emblem, you just do the same exact thing. So Sugarcraft's a bit of an interesting spot. You only want to take Sugarcraft if you can get an emblem early, and obviously Sugarcraft Crown is one way to do that, and you just stack your cake really, really quickly. What you want to do is build everything on your team, like any item you can possibly make, and we kind of go into that in the how to play section on the meta snapshot. Portal Crest, Hard Force Portal, that's why it's really good. Prismatic Ticket, this one is the best reroll augment in the game right now. It's averaging like a 4.10 if you take it on stage 2-1. So if you're going for anything that requires like a ton of gold to roll for, if we go up to the top, that's going to be like the Zoe reroll. That's kind of one of the signs to just hard force it. And you don't really care if you're contested, because you have such a powerful econ augment that whoever's contesting you, like even if they had more Zoes at the start of the game than you, they shouldn't be able to compete with you over like a large sample size. Silver Ticket, decent econ augment at the start. At what cost? This one makes you start at level 6, but you don't get to choose your future augments. It's a bit of a risky YOLO. As you get better and better, this augment becomes a little bit weaker. Like I guarantee you, if we go to like Master Plus and we type in at what cost, like it averages 4.47, but in Emerald, it's going to be averaging a 4.16. So that's one thing to note when looking at stats. A lot of people like to default to Master Plus because that's what the pros use, that's what your streamers use, and it's great for them, but sometimes it might not be for you, because there are a lot of different augments that perform differently at different ratings. For example, things like at what cost, where they reduce the amount of decisions you need to make, are generally better when you are lower rated, because you're going to make more mistakes than one of those high rated players, and it's not your fault, but it's just a good thing to know. So if you ever watch someone stream and you see that they skip an augment that you may have performed really well with, and you're like wondering, why didn't they do it? And you look at your data, you're like, it says 4.16, that's really, really good, right? Well, turns out at different ratings, different augments are better or worse. We'll go over other examples of this later on. Spellblades, right now it's the best augment for the Zoe comp, that's why it's good. Frost Crown, Hard Force Frost. Subscription service, this is another one of those examples of like comparing it to at what cost. If we drop over to the Master Plus and then type in subscription, it's going to be a 4.41. And I did not memorize this before recording this video. I just know just by looking at them, like whether they will improve or like get worse as you get higher rated. I'm not saying don't take this as you get higher rated, and it's just something that's like really useful to know. The reason why, again, is because it makes the game a lot easier to play when you get subscription service, because you just know what comp you're going from the get-go. You just buy whatever forecast you found in your shop, hard force that comp, and like be good to go from there. But some people may argue like, oh, maybe I should practice like playing like a Master Plus even though I'm in gold or platinum. You could do that, but like you're gonna improve a lot better or like climb a lot faster if you just like follow stats based on whatever your actual rating is. And these two augments are a great example of that. Pyro Crest, Pyro's completely bonkers right now. When you go the Frost comp, like Pyro Crest is better than Frost Crest, ironically enough, because you go Varus and then you get 5 Pyro. 5 Pyro is really good. Zap Attack Hero Augment, built different. It's just like the built different comp over here. Very easy to get top 4s with these. Shimmer Scale, completely strong augment right now. What you want to do with this is get the Mogul's Mail. So a lot of people I see, they take like Collector, and I'm like, what are you doing? Collector is the worst one. Other people, they take Gambler's Blade, and it's only good in one scenario, and that's if you have a Rage Blade. But even then, Mogul's Mail farms so much gold that you should pretty much always take Mogul's Mail whenever you get the Shimmer Scale Essence augment, because it gives you the choice whenever you get the All That Shimmers augment, because you open an armory of all 3 of those items, and Mogul's Mail is just the best one. But one thing you need to note whenever you take this augment is that you want a 2-star tank immediately, because you cannot risk having your unit die. An alternative is having like a 1-star 3 cost. So if you have like a 1-star Swain, that should be good enough to farm Mogul's Mail. If you have like a 2-star Poppy, also good enough too. But if you have like 1-star Poppy, 1-star Lilia, maybe like a 1-star Elise, or even like a Rumble, for example. Rumble's a 2 cost. Like sometimes you natural the unit in your shop right after you take this, in which case like congrats, like you win the game. But oftentimes like you don't want to take it in that scenario. I've watched a lot of people take this augment in lower ratings because they see all the pros take this augment, because the pros all think this is like really, really good. And what ends up happening is that they don't farm a lot of gold because they took it by looking at stats, not looking at their board. So that's one thing to consider before taking this, but it is a very good augment. Oftentimes you do have an upgraded unit too, and that is going to be that. Another condition for this is like having another tank item that you could build in addition to whatever you have. So if you have like a Warmogs that you could stack with the Mogul's Mail, or like a Redemption, like literally any tank item, it doesn't have to be like a perfect one. It could even be like Crown Guard or something like that. That's another sign to just auto take this and get like a free top 4. Next up we have is stationary support. This one's good for lose streaking. So in the early game, you want to win or lose streak depending on what's going on. So when you lose streak, you want to look to stabilize at some point in stage 3, and stationary support is a great way to do that because you get your support item and your training dummy. I think it's at stage 3-5, I believe it is, after 8-player combats. So if you lose streak the entirety of the game, you are going to have like a ton of gold. You could like roll down a bit at level 7, get some good board, and then be good to go for like 1.5 stages after that. So I would consider this like a delayed combat augment. It's kind of decent for lose streaking if you want to think of it that way. Generally, when you lose streak, you want to take econ or like one of those delayed things. Help is on the way is treated in a very similar manner. Like after 8-player combats, you get like a little thing. But if you want to win streak, like combat augments are really good. Like Exiles is a combat augment, but it's not just combat augments. Generally on stage 2 for your augments, combat augments are generally bad because you don't have any items on your units. So if you want to get stronger, item augments are going to be much better on average. Conversely, later on in the game, once you already built a bunch of items, combat augments are going to be better. The reason why is because you could only put 3 items on your units. And let's say you are playing, I don't know, like this horizontal Callista comp. You get 3 items on Nasus, you get 3 items on Callista, you get 3 items on Fiora. What are the only ways you can make them stronger? It's going to be through combat augments. If you have like additional item augments, you're going to end up putting them on like Rakan, Camille, Morgana, maybe they're 1-star or something like that. And when that happens, your team just doesn't get as big of a bonus. However, if you got a combat augment such as Giant and Mighty or Exiles, you get to put extra strength on the unit with 3 items already. So that's why taking item augments are generally better in the early game and a bit worse later on. I'm not saying never take them, but that's like a general rule of thumb. Risky Moves is another misunderstood augment. Risky Moves, some people think it's an econ augment because your tactician loses 20 health, but then you gain 33 gold later on. So they lose streak and then they try to stabilize after they get the bonus gold. And that's a big mistake. You actually want to try to win streak with Risky Moves, because if you lose 20 health and then you lose streak, you're going to be at like 30 health to start the game, and sometimes even less. So you want to actually protect your life and then use the gold later on. So level up aggressively when you get Risky Moves, because whatever econ you lose in the early game in stage 2, you're going to get back once this thing triggers. Hunting Frenzy, just hard force some sort of hunter build. Fortune Favors the Bold. This is a very popular augment among all players, but I think this one performs a bit better in Master Plus. It was at a 4.26 there, and okay, 4.35. It doesn't. I guess I am not right all the time, but Fortune Favors the Bold is really good because you just open fort in the early game, and since other players can't go Fortune, or it's going to be really rare that someone else also gets this augment, you often get like really good cash outs no matter what. In previous sets where they had econ augments from traits, or like the Fortune mechanic built in on traits where like the more you lose, the more you get later on, you often have to fight with other open forters, so you could get your like streak griefed. But nowadays that is very rare to happen, so getting Fortune Favors the Bold is like pretty easy to get like a win out. I've rarely seen this board lose. You just try to lose until you have like 1 life left, cash out, and then you pretty much win the game. If you cashed out a bit earlier, like it's okay, like you could still get like a 4th or something like that, or even like I've still seen some people win at like a 30 life cash out. But generally it's going to be pretty good to take. Caretaker's Ally, this one is a bit of a lottery augment because you just get a random 2-cost unit, but I have seen multiple uses of this. Either you hard force whatever unit you get, build some items for them and go from there, or you get a crappy unit and then you just sell it for econ every time you level up. Obviously it's not the ideal use of it, but don't be afraid to do that if you get like a really bad champion, or like a champion that doesn't fit your team or items that you're going for. Giant and Mighty, generic combat augment, like try to take this later in the game. You can see here here. Like on stage 2, it's a 4.29, which is still good, right? Like what I like about this site is that you see the average placement of everything. Normally the average is 4.5, but sometimes things get a little funky. So essentially it like aggregates all the games and does the average that way. But Giant and Mighty performs much better later on. So in stage 3, it's 4.11. Stage 4, it's 4.14. But again, it's the way items work and how units scale. Not as strong in the early game because you don't have items to like kind of multiply to get this 5% max health boost from. Category 5, very good AD augment, just hard force, one of the either Callista or Varus comps, anything that uses AD. Jinx is probably the best comp to go for this, but Jinx is a bit less popular right now. Over Encumbered, this is another like delayed combat augment, very, very nice to use. And it makes the game a lot easier because you don't have to hold anything on your bench. So what you end up doing is just playing duplicates of units on your board so that you could hopefully 2-star them in stage 3. And that's the time where you get all your items. Another note on Over Encumbered is that you don't want to open any of the orbs that you kill on the Krugs, which is stage 2-7, because if you get units from that, they turn into gold and you'd rather have the units. So you wait till the round ends and then you pop all the orbs and then you get the units that way. It's a little bit of a small optimization. Portal Crown, this one is good if you're forcing Portal. Absolutely incredible because Portal is just completely bonkers right now. Pretty much just an auto take if you have any semblance of a Portal board early on. Spoils of War, only take this one if you're like giga win streaking, because if someone else has a combat augment and you take Spoils of War, even if your board is strong, like sometimes you still might lose. So only take this if you have upgraded units plus some good synergies plus some good items on your bench. Sleight of Hand, just a generic good item augment. I pretty much always take this. There's always some use for it. Too Healthy, this one's really good in like the Cogmog comp. You could just hard force that from there. There are a couple other comps it works in as well though. Buried Treasures, this is a good delayed combat augment. You get like one item component every single round, and overall it's like pretty good because you get a lot of power during stage 3 and early parts of stage 4. And a lot of people consider that like the most important parts of the game. The one thing to consider whenever you take Buried Treasures though, is that you want to play a comp that actually utilizes all those items. So Horizontal Callista, it's great, right? Because you have like Callista items that you need, you have Nasus tank items, Fiora bruiser items, but you also can itemize like a random legendary 2-star that you get. So like a Morgana, a Camille, like Rakan can use items as well, right? Like worst case, you could even throw a Spear of Shojin on Zillion so he stuns people a little more often. So a comp like this where they play a lot of expensive units, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4+ cost units, it's going to be really good in those cases. Compare that to a comp like Portal Rise where you really only care about Rise's items and then you throw random tank items on Taric. You don't really need that many items to make this comp work unless you get like a Yuumi 2. But that is pretty rare. Another example is going to be Deja Vu Galio. Deja Vu Galio doesn't really care about all these item components that you get from Buried Treasures. First of all, he specifically needs Rageblade, Rageblade, Gunblade, and getting random components doesn't lead to that outcome very often, right? Another reason is you only care about Galio, then one other tank, whoever you 3-starred, right? So you just throw 3 tank items on your main tank, throw 3 items on Galio. You don't really need anything else after that. Last example I'm gonna go over because it's like a very good one is Multi-Striker Kassadin. You really only care about Kassadin items. Everyone else like kind of doesn't matter. I mean, they do matter, but they're not even close to important as Kassadin. So taking Buried Treasures and then forcing Kassadin is generally not going to be a good idea. So just keep that in mind before taking this. Spider Queen, Champion Augment, just hard force Elise. If you have like a 2-star Elise and then you get this augment, you get 6 copies of them. Very, very strong stuff. Learning to Spell, if you're playing the Zoe Ari comp, this is going to be completely bonkers. Make sure you just have them before you take the augment, put them on your board and just farm up. Unleash the Beast. A lot of people don't like taking this one. There's another one called like Crown Guarded and then the Edge of Night one, not today. But I actually think these augments are super, super good at the start of the game if you have a good item holder for them. So if you have an upgraded unit that can use whatever item augments that these things give out, always take them because item augments just give you a free win streak in the early game. So that's when you should be taking these. But if you're trying to lose streak, like avoid these at all costs. Band of Thieves, good generic item augment in the early game. I'm the carry now. This one's just like on average very good. It's like a stat check. And right now it's doing well in the stat check because 4.34, 4.32, 4.37, they probably need to tune it down a little bit at all stages. So this is a pretty safe auto take if you have nothing better to do. Epoch, This is really good for fast aiding. This along with Slammin' I think are my two favorite augments right now. Slammin's down here because I love doing the fast aid stuff. I love playing the Olaf and Varus build, so no brainer for this one there. Iron Assets. I like this one a lot if I can make use of the component anvil early on in the game. So if you get 3 components at the start and you have like one good combo of items, take Iron Assets because you could often finish the other item and get like a huge win streak at the start of the game. High voltage, very, very strong stuff. If you can stack Ionic Sparks, just auto take this. So if you can build an Ionic Spark and then you get an additional one from taking the Augment, you pretty much auto win the early game if you have a 2-star tank to throw it on, even without any synergies there. Hard Commit, I highly recommend this Augment for people who are below diamonds because it's just so easy to play. You will never get confused when you take this. You just use it, you get a bunch of units for it, and like the game pretty much auto plays itself and you could focus on every other part of TFT to get better. Raining Gold, this one's just a generic econ augment. If you're loose streaking, it's gonna be great there. Witchy Wallop, hero augment, Slammin', econ augment, but this one also gives you a bit of power. So I prefer Slammin' over Epic because this one makes my team stronger so I can like get a lot of HP and get a lot of experience, whereas Epic just gives me experience and rolls later on in the game. So I prefer Slammin' even though it does a little bit worse in the stats. But of course, you have to play around with the items on your bench a little bit because you have to use them all the time. So it could be a little annoying. Combat Caster, this one is decent if you're doing the Ari Zoe comp. Again, it's a combat augment, so it's a bit worse on stage 2, but in stage 3 and 4, this one is like one of the best augments. What doesn't kill you? If you're doing a Giga loose streak, yeah, take this. Crown Guarded, good in the early game, bad later on. Silver Spoon, decent econ augment. I also consider this like a pseudo combat augment because you get a lot of experience early game, which means that you get to level up really easily, so you play more units than everyone else. So this one's just like a generic good value augment. Beast Friends, this one is good if you're forcing like any sort of B comp. Component Buffet, I like this one if you are on stuff like Scuttle Puddle or Crab Rave. That gets a lot more powerful there because you get a lot of extra components from the loot drop, so that makes Component Buffet a lot better. Still decent on like normal maps, but obviously much better in the other ones. March of Progress, this is a good reroll augment. This one gives you like a ton of experience and you could just do 3 cost or even 2 cost reroll very, very easily whenever you take this. So in a 3 cost reroll meta, this augment is going to be king. Unfortunately, right now it is not, but it's still performing very well overall. Frost Crest, just force frost. I don't know why this one actually performs so badly at stage 2. I guess because people are over forcing frost. Like whenever you take a trait augment, don't be a dum-dum and take it when you have none of the complementary units. Only take it if you have like at least a couple of the units to activate the trait and hopefully natural some of the upgrades later on. So even if, let's say, like what was the best emblem so far that we encountered? Let's say you get offered, okay, I'm not going to count Sugarcraft because that one's a little bit different, but let's say like this Frost Crown. This one's averaging a 4.17 at stage 2. If not, you're going to perform a lot worse, and I think people are just over-forcing these types of emblems sometimes just because it's good on the tier list. And one thing you have to remember, as with anything else in TFT, just because something is good in a tier list doesn't mean it's actually good in your game, because the champions you get in your shops are gonna not be average. You know, there's a variance built into it. Like it's literally part of the game, right? So you have to play to whatever cards you're dealt, and that can be a little tricky sometimes, which makes stats a little bit annoying to deal with. Caretaker's Favor, this is a very good fast 8 augment because it encourages you to level up because you get a free component anvil whenever you do. But one thing is this works really well when you are on a high econ portal. So stuff like gold subscription, this becomes even better because you get to go to level 8 even faster. So what I like to do is take this on like gold subscription, but if I'm on a normal map and I want to take this, let's say I want a fast 8, I'd still take this, but then maybe on stage 3, I might take an econ augment so I could reach level 8 that much easier to get the power spike or make the most use out of this augment. Stimpak, really good at loose streaking. Upgraded Adventure, really good for the Zoe comp. It's pretty much like handmade for that. Combat Bandages, this one is going to be generic combat augment, but I think this one works a bit better in the early game just because of the way like the numbers scale. Keepers, generic good early game augment for combat. I love taking this in stage 3 because oftentimes if you are win streaking in the early game and you need a really good combat augment in stage 3, this generally is one of the better ones because it just makes your whole team so tanky, and you're going to be level 6 at that time. That's enough to like kind of make like a pretty good circle or whatever to get like the maximum keeper value. Freaky Friday, this one used to be much better, but it's still pretty decent. If you're playing a comp that requires a lot of items, like Infinity Force can almost be used on any carry. Escort Quest, this one's really good if you're trying to win streak. Patient Study, great for lose streaking, but generally just a good fast 8 augment. Pandora's Items, this one is going to be good if you need very specific items. Like if you're playing the Galio comp and you need 2 Rage Blades, like yeah, go Pandora's Items. If not, I think there are better item augments to kind of go for. Pilfer, decent econ augment. Just make sure you actually are able to kill 1 unit each round. So definitely do not try to like lose streak with this. But if you do like a win-lose, 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 oftentimes like Pilfer's decent in those scenarios. Obviously you want to win like every round. That would be the best outcome for this. But since it doesn't give you any combat power, it's kind of hard to go on like a full win streak. But this one's good if you have like 1 upgrade and like you can realistically kill at least 1 unit per round. Mage Crown, great if you're forcing mages. Mage Crown is good because you can drop it on whatever unit you want and it makes them cast twice. It's a very unique interaction, and that's probably why it's this high up. Also, you get an Ionic Spark, which is a really good early game item. I thought they actually removed these prismatic crowns having items like that, but I guess not. Sugarcraft Crest, only take it if you're forcing Sugarcraft. Pandora's Bench, great for reroll. AFK, this one is going to be good for econing, but again, this is one of those augments that kind of removes decision making from you. So as you get higher and higher, this one's going to perform worse and worse. Scapegoat, this one's not bad if you're trying to like lose streak a little gracefully. Just throw the training dummy in the front and like put all your units in the back just to make sure it dies first. 1, 2s, 3s. This one's a little weird. It's one of those augments where if you don't know what you're doing, whether you're win streaking or lose streaking, 1, 2s, 3s is a very good augment to take because it'll decide that for you. You take it, you either get very good champions and get upgraded units, or you get complete dog crap and then you just sell everything and make a bunch of econ. So it's like a coin flip. I don't like taking this one personally, but I know a lot of people like this augment. Item Grab Bag, this is one of my favorite augments. It's just like, if you have random upgraded units on your board, but you're not sure what comp you're trying to go and you haven't built any items yet, just take Item Grab Bag. It's going to be pretty solid there. Spoils of War, only take this if you have like a lot of upgrades. You're going to be on a prismatic augment that gives you no power at the start of the game. So if anyone else has any semblance of combat from their augment, compare this to Radiant Relics. If you take Spoils of War, you want to win, right? How can you win when someone else takes Radiant Relics at the start of the game? It's very hard to, unless you have tons of upgrades. So when you take Spoils of War, make sure you have a bunch of upgrades so you could actually kill stuff to get loot. Aggressive Preservation, if you're forcing some sort of Preserver comp, I guess take this. But this one probably going to be better in stage 3 and 4. I wouldn't generally take this early on. Next one up we have is Radiant Relics. The reason why is because there are no low cost preservers. It's just Zillion at 2 cost, but there's no like 1 cost unit. So because of that, I don't know if I'm going preservers yet. So I wouldn't take this just to hard force it. Compare that to something like Mage, where you could have like a Soraka and a Seraphine in the early game. Those are both 1 cost mages. And then you get the third one easily with Mage Crown. Getting Bard and Zillion here, like Bard doesn't carry and Zillion doesn't carry. So like, you can't really like build your team around this that easily. So I don't recommend taking this that much, but if you have nothing better to do, or if you know you're forcing some sort of preserver comp, I guess take this early on. But of course, later on, like stage 3, stage 4, it's going to be really good if you have those preservers. Radiant Relics, great in the early game. And you might be wondering, when should I take like Radiant items or when should I take artifact items? They're generally best on comps that focus on 1 or 2 units because you focus all the power on one person. Remember how before we were talking about, oh, like if you have 3 items on a unit, they can't get any stronger unless you get combat augments for them. Well, I was kind of lying to you because the other way is to put 3 Radiant items on them. They're going to be really strong there too, right? Like, of course, you rarely get 3 Radiant items, but it's another way to like concentrate power on 1 or 2 units. So if you play a comp that only cares about 1 or 2 units, this is going to be really good for that. Double Down, if you know you're going to win streak or lose streak, you could take this, pretty self-explanatory. Not today, a great item augment. I think this one's undertaken, if I had to guess, but I really like this in the early game because it allows you to play all the bruiser comps, so stuff like Olaf, it's good on him, it's good on the Fiora comps. There's a lot of different things you could put it on, and it gives you an item in the early game. So if you can win streak, just take that. You're going to be good to go. Stars Are Born. If you have great items and you don't have any upgraded units, that's when you take this. Or if you're trying to force a 1 and 2 cost reroll build. Upward Mobility. This is a generically good like econ augment. Replication. I don't really like this in the early game. I like this more in stage 3 when I see more of my items. But if you're really chasing one component, like let's say you need a blue buff and like your comp doesn't work without it, like take it, try to see if you get a tier, and if not, pivot to something else. That's very possible to do. So I generally only take this if I really need an item to like activate some sort of weird build. Thorn-plated armor, generic good item augment. Oh yeah, another thing with item augments is that you need to put the items on units that are upgraded. So what if you had this board here where you have 3 Eldritch, 2 Shapeshifter from Elise, Nyla, Ashe, and Jace. If you have like a 2-star Elise and a 1-star Nyla, would you take the Edge of Night augment? And it's going to be a decent use of the augment, but Nyla at 1-star is not going to be like super carrying fights by any means, right? So unless you have like other items that you built to complement her with, so if you have like a Bloodthirster or like a Sterix Gauge that you could build in addition to the free Edge of Night that you get, I'd probably try to pick something else. Maybe I get an item for Elise instead and I get the, what's it called, like the Bramble Vest one, like Thorn-plated armor, because if I have a 2-star Elise, I kind of want to play around that a bit more, so I get the tank item for her. However, if you're playing something like Warwick, Twitch, Blitzcrank, and Namzi, and you have a 2-star Warwick, 1-star everything else, like maybe the Edge of Night augment would do pretty decently, because Warwick can kind of use it because he auto attacks a bunch, right? So always pick the items based on whatever you have upgraded. Don't just pick them because they look good in the stats. Living Forge gonna be pretty decent if you play a comp that uses a lot of items like that, like Gwen Fiora comp. Pandora's items, great if you need specific items like that Galio comp. Immovable Object, this one's just like generically decent. Support items are kind of like combat augments in the way that they're able to give bonus stats to whoever your main carries are. So whenever you get a support item, even though before I said you can't stack more than 3 items on someone else, like another way to put additional stats on them is going to be through stuff like Immovable Object, because you get a free Randuin's Omen and it hits pretty much half the map, right? So this is another example of an augment getting better as the game goes on. 4.55, 4.31, then 4.27. Scoreboard Scrapper, this one's good if you're kind of lose streaking in the early game because you get a bunch of power later on and you kind of stack it. Spoils of War, we already talked about this. Magic Wand, this one's going to be good if you can complete an item on it. Typically this one's better later on in the game because you really take it for the plus 18 ability power and if it builds you an item. In the early game, you don't really know what comp you're going, so you don't know if you need that rod or not. Wandering Trainer, pretty decent, but it is like a YOLO. I personally hate this. I don't like flipping the coin when I play TFT. If I wanted to flip a coin, I'd just flip a coin. I wouldn't try to turn on TFT and then pick Wandering Trainer. But you kind of just have to play around whatever you get. I think Wandering Trainer 1 is much better than Wandering Trainer 2 based on their relative power, because for a gold augment, getting 2 attached emblems is really nice, but for a prismatic, getting 3, normally with 3 random emblems, one of them doesn't really work with your team, so they're pretty much the same thing, right? Keepers, this one's going to be good later on in the game, especially in the mid game. Clear Mind, decent econ augment. Witchcraft Crest, if you're forcing like the Karma build with Witchcraft, going to be pretty solid. Preserver, I don't really like this one that much. It just depends if preservers are good or not. But pretty much that's going to sum up like the first like 90 augments that are really good on stage 2. Some of the other ones, like it's not that they're bad, it's just that they're situational. So for example, let's scroll down to the bottom a bit, but for choosing between all the other ones after the ones we went through, it's not so much never pick them because they're low in the stats. It's more so you have to actually read them and actually utilize them. So for example, if you have no upgrades and you're loose streaking, like getting Placebo is perfectly fine, right? Because you just get a bunch of gold and you can use that to econ up in the early game and hopefully stabilize later on. If you have a lot of multi-strikers and you see press the attack, like obviously you're taking press the attack. You don't care that it's averaging a 4.6 in the early game. But there are other examples of augments which are really, really good, but just very situational. My favorite example of this is going to be Birthday Present. Birthday Present, you get an upgraded unit every time you level up. So when you get to level 9, you get a free 2-star legendary, which oftentimes that's like super, super powerful, right? But in a lot of games, you don't have enough econ to actually go level 9. Or maybe we're not even in a fast 9 meta. If you're in a fast 9 meta, Birthday Present's going to be performing a lot better. But if you're in a normal game, I would generally try to avoid this. The times you would take Birthday Present is if you are in a high econ portal. So if you are in Gold Subscription, Loot Subscription, Crab Rave, Scuttle Puddle, Gold Opener, Birthday Present is going to be much better than a 4.76, and I think people don't really realize that. I don't know what it would actually average, maybe like a 4.4 even, depending on the case, but there are going to be situations where you want to take some of these like bad augments, like these 4.76 augments, like Level Up is another great example. They kind of are related. But if you just do like random data checks, like it's not going to actually be that helpful all the time. So like know the top like 50 or so augments, like try to memorize them and know which ones are good. But then for everything else, Don't use MasterCard, use your brain and try to figure out if they actually fit your team. But of course, like the principles I said before still apply. Like you may have noticed as we scroll down a bit, the augments that are generally like bad early are all these like combat augments, like stuff like Unified Resistance, Martyr. They're great later on in the game, but in the early game, they're generally pretty bad. Again, it's just because they're combat augments and you'd rather have an item augment if you want to make your team stronger. Other bad augments are ones that just have like bad math or are bad traits. So for example, Bastion Crest, like can you think of like the best user of Bastion emblem? It really is just any tank, right? So it's like pretty flexible, but there's no like one unit that completely destroys with it. Contrast that with maybe like a Frost Spatula. And I know off the top of my head that Varus is the best user of Frost Crown. And if I look at Pyrocrest, the best user of this one is going to be Olaf. Like you don't have to think that deeply about it. Well, actually, no, it's not even Olaf. It's Smolder. But you don't get a 2-star Smolder every game. Kalista can use it too. But essentially, like there are units that are big carries that can utilize those traits. And that's just not true for some of the ones down here. Like Bastion Crest, Scholar Crest, like, yeah, you could put Scholar Crest on like a Nami, but is there really like a Scholar build where you could slot Nami in very easily? Like there aren't too many of those, right? There's stuff like Honeymancy Crest where it is good in certain situations if you know you're forcing Honeymancy, but when you're going a Honeymancy build, you'd much rather have like an Econ augment to make sure you get 3-star everything. So that's generally what the like bad augments are. Like the combat ones just aren't good in the early game. The trait ones, they're just like the worst traits in the beginning in that particular meta. And then for the econ augments that are down here, like Three's Company or like Hedge Fund, they're generally down here because the math isn't mathing, you know, like they just give less gold than the other econ augments, and that's the only reason why they're down there. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're picking these augments. Let's do some honorable mentions. Let's look at some of the good augments in stage like 3 and stage 4. Generally in stage 4, all the combat augments are really good, like Exile's Little Buddies, Support Golem, Spellblades. It's pretty much as I said before, like you may have noticed these were much further down the list. But of course, any trait augment that's like related to what you wanted is also really good. But you may notice again, like not a lot of item augments up here. Like I can't even see one of them. Like Item Collector, it's not actually like an item augment. It benefits you more if you have more items. Like the first one I see is Band of Thieves, but that's a Thieves Gloves. That's something you put on like some random unit. So just knowing these kind of themes hopefully help you pick your augments better. I know this video was a bit unorganized, but I like to mainly do my data checking on stage 2, and then after that in stage 3 and stage 4, I pick whatever based on what my board needs. So hopefully this video kind of helps you out. Like again, picking your augment in stage 2 is like one of the most important things ever. And kind of knowing the augment picking rules is also very important. Again, all this kind of depends on your board though. If you're trying to win streak, getting an item augment is ideal, but if you don't see any because we only have like one reroll for each slot, taking some sort of combat augment like Spellblades might not be that bad, you know? Well, Spellblades is just really broken right now, but you know what I'm trying to get at. Then later on in the game, try to get those combat augments and hopefully go from there. When do you want to take an econ augment in the late game? Well, that's generally going to be when you have no gold and you miss your roll down. That could be a time to kind of use it. For example, Placebo Plus. This one is the one you get in stage 3-2. This one's averaging a 4.35, so that's actually pretty good, right? But let's pretend you leveled up to level 6 and you have like 20 gold on stage 3-2, which is pretty often for a lot of people. Getting Placebo Plus is really helpful because it kind of just catches you up in the game. But if you had 50 gold already, there are probably better things to go for. But that's gonna be it for me today. Hopefully this guide kind of helped you out on like when to pick each augment, which augments are good right now, because it's like a really important part of this meta for some reason. But that's gonna be it for me today. Hopefully I see you all next time.